I.O.T. Powering the Digital Economy. Brought to you by Schneider Electric.
In our increasingly interconnected world, the internet and digital innovation are offering opportunities which are simply unprecedented. They are changing both the face of business and customer relationships. But how does a traditional sector like the construction industry cope with the shifting landscape that is the Internet of Things?
New technological innovations are having an enormous impact on traditional working methods and revolutionising the way consumers connect with the design and construction process.
The construction industry has traditionally been a slow, labour-intensive and physically risky business. The process of building anything from a private home to an Olympic park involves huge manpower and the precise sharing of a vision between the customer and the many businesses involved in bringing the project together. In this programme, we're looking at how the big players in the world of construction, those who are responsible for our infrastructure and built environment, are responding to the digital revolution.
And what about the companies that are a product of the digital age? How are they using breakthroughs in computing power to reach out to their customer base and develop the market?
So how far is all this new tech going to take design and construction, and how will it change the business to consumer relationship?
I'll also be talking to an industry expert about the regulations needed to keep pace with the flow of digital innovation. Building Information Modelling, or BIM for short, is a major development in digital workflow that's transforming the way construction companies are doing business. I've come to the site of the National Automotive Innovation Centre at the University of Warwick, a $100 million project being built to new BIM specifications by Balfour Beatty. By centralising all data on a project and using 3D visualisation, BIM makes building and design more accessible to the customer than ever before.
Balfour Beatty is one of the world's largest construction companies. It has 30,000 employees and in 2016 had a revenue of $5.5 billion. The company was started in 1909, so it's well used to adapting to change.
Dean Banks is Managing Director for Balfour Beatty's UK Construction Services.
Hello Adam, nice to meet you, how are you?
Prior to joining the company, he worked for manufacturing giants Dunlop Aviation and Massey Ferguson.
You're mainly really a business-to-business company here. How much, therefore, does the consumer feature in your calculations and in the way you run the business?
We are a business-to-business, but I mean the customer is always the client at the end. And, you know, what we are building is with them in mind very much. So whether that is the design and architect of the building that people will see visually from the outside, and then you start looking at the technology that's built inside the building. So, you know, how are they going to use the building? What concepts do they need to have in place to make sure that innovation adds advantage to their life moving forward?
And the building that we've seen today, the NAIC, can you tell me how digital technologies have helped that project?
Because we've built it in BIM and we've used BIM as per the government's requirements, they're going to get massive benefit from managing the asset after we have long gone, because they'll have all of the data about how the building operates, and they'll be able to utilise that to fundamentally tweak the management system so they can maximise the usage moving forward.
So the data and technologies you're using in constructing it will actually help the consumer in using it for decades to come?
Absolutely. And I don't think that was necessarily the intention of the client on the NIAC at the outset, but I think they've quickly latched on to the benefit of that. But you can see some of the concepts that you will have seen today, I am sure, will be building into consumer homes in the future.
You think your industry, at your scale, even though it might be business to business, is incubating ideas which will eventually move down the line to business to consumer?
I'm a consumer, so when I walk around some of our buildings, I often look and go, that is fantastic. And if I could put that into my own home, I would. So I'm sure that an awful lot of other people are walking around facilities, taking that on board and thinking about what they'd like in their own homes. Be that the external cladding of a building, be that the technology that's built into that particular building that allows them to make their life easier. I think if you look at just at simple things like utility bills, the end consumer today is challenging the constructor to make sure that the total cost of running that asset later is different. So we're looking at materials that are breathable in the facility, can be censored such that they can give us information to make informed decisions how you run the home in the most efficient manner. So there's no doubt as we move forward, the consumer will drive what we build for the future.
Digital tech is transforming the traditional face of construction and design, especially in the fields of 3D modelling and immersive environments. International companies like Trimble and Faro Technologies have invested heavily in augmented and virtual reality tech, selling their products and services to the construction industry around the world. But the development of 3D visualization in the sector is also extending beyond the build itself into property sales and even interior design.
I've come to Amsterdam, where one company, Rumi, is combining the power of 3D visualization and handheld technologies to give customers new insight into choosing and designing their own homes.
Founded in 2010, Rumi have put 3D firmly into the hands of the consumer with a powerful app that allows you to visualize and design your built environment on a tablet or smartphone. Enrico Rossa is Vice President of Development and Global Operations. Prior to joining the company in 2012, he was Director of Program Management at TomTom.
Simply detect the surface.
Right. So that's you're showing it the room.
Yeah, showing the room is showing it where you want to place.
Oh, and suddenly the chair has appeared in the real room. Right.
Shall we have a
Let's
look?
have a go. So maybe put it there.
Yeah.
So I think that's quite nice. It's not there in reality, but it is there.
Not bad.
I'm an interior designer.
First time.
New career. And where did the idea originate from?
It originated quite a few years ago in our company when we thought, wouldn't it be great if you could visualize and experience a piece of furniture in your own home? And back then we didn't have the benefit of AR technologies and hardware at our disposal. So we developed a bespoke render engine that allowed us to convert a 2D image, a standard 2D image taken with a camera, into a 3D space with a few simple measurements, 3 steps. Once you have that 3D space, you'd be able to clean it up, take out all your kids' toys lying all over the floor, remove the old furniture and the old curtains, change the flooring, and then put in completely new furniture and visualize it with that new furniture. That's really enabled us to take advantage of the fact that consumers have these devices in their pocket all the time. It's on the go. Anytime they want to see something in augmented reality or virtual reality, they're able to do that with our app.
Explain to me what's happened with the company. This is still quite new and I don't see a lot of customers using it.
Well, I mean, we were really focused on the US market, and there the uptake is just growing exponentially for us. Our focus these days is to bring together 3 groups of people. One is the consumers, the other is the real estate companies, and the other is retail manufacturers. And they're all mutually beneficial to each other. The retailers allow us to model 3D furniture, so that's where we have our content, and that's really the foundation of everything. The real estate companies would like to show off their properties, their homes, in the best way possible, so they can use our software to then take the furniture that we got from retailers and stage those properties in a very beautiful, appealing way, which you can also switch on the fly per home buyer. So if a home buyer doesn't like a classic style in that home, they could on the fly switch it to a modern view of that same place. So then you can really feel and get a sense of living there yourself. Yeah? It's a lot more appealing. And then of course the consumer who can use our technology for free can do all of these things depending on what they're looking for.
So how significant a change do you think it will make to consumer behavior having access to this sort of tech?
I think it's massive. I mean, if you look at the old-fashioned way of shopping for these things, it was very much based on trial and error, where you would have to go make a shopping trip, and then at best you would get one model of it in one particular fabric, and you'd have to imagine not only what it would look like in a different material, but how it would look like in your own house, and will it fit, and will it go with my curtains? Now with this technology, all of that just disappears. You can do it all in your house. You can look at the entire range of that sofa and all its different materials and colors in your own space, size and all.
Later on, we'll discover how Rumi is integrating its software with construction hardware to help consumers reimagine buildings.
Bringing 3D visualization of real-world projects onto consumer devices is ushering in a whole new era of expectations between businesses and consumers. But that technology also brings with it the fast and furious exchange of data, much of it personal. So how are the regulatory bodies, the people who police the flow of data in the design and construction industries, coping with this new challenge? Well, after the break, I'll be seeing how regulations are evolving to handle the Internet of Things.
As our methods of doing business in the digital age diversify, so too does our need for regulations, especially when it comes to data protection.
Sharing your data with a whole range of companies is now an everyday occurrence. Customers put their faith in businesses, and businesses are under pressure to handle that data responsibly. But with new developments in the construction industry like business information modeling, that centralization of data needs policing like never before.
Paul Wilkinson is Deputy Chair of the Information Systems Panel at the Institution of Civil Engineers in London and an authority on the use of collaboration technology in the international construction market.
We're used to thinking of this industry as a business-to-business sector. I don't employ an engineer, but how relevant is the consumer, the direct consumer relationship to this industry?
I think they're very relevant. If we think about just about every built asset, they're built for a human purpose. We have passengers, if we're talking about transport systems. We have residents, if we're talking about housing. We have workers, if we're talking about workplaces. We're all stakeholders in that. Moreover, in many cases, we are taxpayers. Our wishes have to be taken into consideration for the successful operation of all of those facilities.
The EU has come up with a lot of new regulations. I think the GDPR is one of those new schemes. Can you just explain what that is?
GDPR is an update of data protection legislation. We have the Data Protection Act in the UK. Other countries have the same. What has happened over recent times is that we've detected really that those provisions were in need of modernisation to reflect the use that data is now put to and to put in place greater protections for the individual. So this is very much about putting you in control of what data is collected about you and how it's used, and if at all, if it's passed to anybody else.
Let's talk a bit about regulations. How much of an issue is it for you when you're running your business, when you're designing huge projects like the ones we've seen today?
When there's not a problem, it's not an issue. I think obviously, we have to be mindful of regulation as it changed, and we are very mindful to make sure we meet and adopt the right regulations that are in place. But it is a changing field. As we put more and more data into the cloud, we've got to think about how we protect that data, not only for the interests of Balfour Beatty, but for our clients, for our supply chain, and for the data integrity of the individual employees that we have working here at Balfour Beatty. We use a lot of encryption, algorithms, and we'll work with third parties to make sure that we are at the forefront appropriately of using the right technology to protect the consumer's needs.
I think whenever you're dealing with consumers' information, you should take it seriously, and we do that especially. But we're in a position where we don't store a lot of private data for our consumers, so we're not overly concerned in that area or that regard. What we do have is obviously well protected, but we don't need to go into any extraordinary actions.
There are some regulations, the GDPR regulations, which have come in and put a lot of emphasis on a lot of companies to do certain things. How much has that affected you?
At the end of the day, it's really just pushing companies to take people's and consumers' and customers' information more seriously and treat it with respect. A lot of companies have taken shortcuts in the past or just left it, oh, we'll deal with that when it happens. What this law, let's say, is doing is putting it on the front and center, putting it in their faces and saying, guys, you need to take this seriously and you need to do these steps to show that you're taking it seriously.
You're working in an area which is highly regulated. Construction's highly regulated. There are lots of different rules, and indeed across borders there are different rules in one country than the next. Is that an issue that is a problem for the company at all?
People are not relying on our software to build buildings yet. So we don't have to have any worries about health and safety regulations or any of those. We're obviously making sure that our models are correctly measured and show up correctly in your space, but it's not a life and death situation.
Rumi and Balfour Beatty are both confident that their data management systems are secure, but the use and protection of digital information also brings with it other, more concrete concerns.
Given how centrally you think digital technologies are to the future of this industry, what about the physical security of the buildings in which they are controlled or the servers on which that data is held?
We're starting to see, especially with the terrorist incidents and other problems that we've had in recent times, a growing need to make our built assets more secure. We are being exhorted to design with security in mind, and that includes designing with the secure use of data in mind, so that data about the key systems in a building won't be shared with those that aren't authorised to do so. We're shifting away from the transparency of information in a design process towards a world in which only people who need to know information have access to certain key data.
So the founding fathers of this building built an industry on paper. Mm-hmm. Now it's built on servers with a huge demand for power. How much thought is given to the reliability of those power supplies and that transformation?
We're talking a lot more now about resilience of our infrastructure at every level. The nature of many of the systems that we've been talking about, they are driven by microprocessors in server farms, huge consumers of energy and of cooling. And we've also got, in many of our buildings now, intelligent systems that make our buildings smart, which will increasingly make our cities smart. All of those need power to run them. Might not be as much power as it used to be. We've got some more and more efficient reporting systems, but nonetheless, we are going to be very reliant upon electronic power to manage most of our infrastructure.
The construction industry is confident that the technology it's implementing is benefiting the customer. So, after the break, I'll be looking at what the future holds for the constructor, the contractor, and of course, the consumer. The rate of change in digital technologies is causing a seismic shift in operations in the construction sector, with sometimes companies and even regulators scrabbling to keep up with innovation. Well, there's no sign of a slowdown in these digital developments. So how does the sector see its future?
I think from a Balfour Beatty perspective and from a consumer perspective, we are about trying to make life as easy as it can be. So whether that is in the way that we carry out our daily lives, in terms of just switching on the heating at home, and controlling it better, to giving them data to help them be better informed about making decisions. We hope in the future that buildings will manage the environment themselves. So start to modify to the environment. So when it's cold, switch into a different mode to when it's warm. When people aren't in the building, switch into a different mode to when the building is full. And that is our expectation of the buildings of the future.
For Paul Wilkinson, the relationship between constructor and consumer has never held more promise.
You clearly feel that there are very strong forces for change actually coming from this industry. What sort of future do you think that designs?
I think my scenario is one of which the industry has shifted from just a focus on delivering built assets to delivering complete experiences, where people understand what it is they're going to get and what environment it is. They can visualize what it is going to be like to work or be educated in or made better if they're in a hospital. So they understand what environment that's going to be.
It can be a great democratizing force, that technology. It moves it from the hallowed halls of a place like this to my sitting room. I might be able to understand your designs with these VR and AR headsets.
It's a great enabler also for public involvement in the built environment. We're seeing VR and AR tools being used for public consultation processes where people can view a virtual reality model of a building before it's been built. They can view how it's going to be built, the sequence, so they understand what the impact might be on their neighbourhood of vehicle movements, of dust and noise and vibration. Because those are things now which we can model and we can show to concerned residents. And we can also take steps using off-site fabrication, for example, to reduce those nuisances accordingly.
That really does move this industry from a business-to-business sector to a business-to-consumer one.
We're much more focused then on the consumers, the end users, the neighbours of our industry. You will often see considerate constructor banners on the edges of sites. Social media and the technology give us that opportunity to become even more considerate constructors and more communicative with the end users and the neighbours and other stakeholders around a project.
So when you're thinking about all those technologies that we've seen on site and that you talk about and think about, do you think the customer element of that has a role to play?
I think without any doubt, Balfour Beatty has to be collaborative with all of the people that are probably more customer focused to a degree than others. And if you look at automotive vehicles, you know, over time we've got to think about how do we put infrastructure in place to cater for that change. You know, you look today, large car parks. In the future, you probably won't need car parking space. You'll share a vehicle. We'll need roads that are self-healing, that can cater for the use of vehicles on those roads very differently to how it operates today. There's a lot of opportunity for us to work with third parties that are embedded with those clients and understand their needs for the future.
Enrico Rossa of Rumi believes the connective potential of 3D technology for the consumer has yet to be fully realised.
What do you think the potential is for integrating your piece of software into other bits of software? I mean, we're surrounded by construction right here behind me, for instance. They may be running building information management systems. Would your system integrate with that very easily?
Potentially. What we do have right now is a very interesting collaboration with a company called Matterport in the US. And what Matterport has is hardware that can scan the interior of a house, property, and they create a full 3D model of that interior, a point cloud. Now, together with us, we can then take that 3D model of the house and completely stage it with furniture, 3D models, decorations, the whole thing. It's a livable home. And once we've done that, once we've completed that, you can actually, as a consumer, walk around an entire house that you potentially would like to buy in augmented reality or virtual reality with furniture and swap out pieces of furniture as you go. And you can see 100 of those spaces in an hour without having to make multiple appointments with all real estate agents and travel.
Right. So this is the death of the real estate agent, really. You
It's
can
an
do
enabler.
it via software.
It's an enabler. At the end of the day, I'm sure that they would still love to walk through in virtual reality the people and actually describe that apartment.
I mean, you're trying to move into an industry which has often been quite resistant to change, has been around for a long time, and there's a certain way of doing things, and it's not your way.
Sure.
How much resistance has there been to actually this new approach?
There has been some resistance. I think there's always resistance when there's something new, when it's different from what they've always done and how they've always worked. It's scary. But you know, we're not the only ones working in augmented reality, in virtual reality. They're seeing it everywhere. They're seeing their kids play Pokemon Go on the iOS, and they're becoming familiar with AR, which then lowers the boundaries for them to feel comfortable with new technology.
Right. So just the fact that there are augmented reality games out there makes the serious application easier to sell, does it?
Absolutely, I feel that it does. It lowers the threshold. It makes it more acceptable. It's normal. If your kid can do it, then certainly you as an adult, their parent and caregiver, can also do it.
It sounds like you think this digital technology is fundamentally changing the relationship with the consumer.
Absolutely, absolutely.
For a sector that has sometimes been rather slow to embrace change, the construction industry does seem to have developed a real appetite for digital innovation, benefiting businesses and empowering consumers with improved efficiencies and some real breakthrough technologies like augmented reality. But as the amount of collaboration in construction projects grows, so does the need to regulate the vast amounts of data involved. But as long as we can manage that, we can look forward to construction projects which are greener, leaner, and indeed safer for us all.
I.O.T. Powering the Digital Economy. Brought to you by Schneider Electric.